Imagine a normal trip to the supermarket in the Chicago suburbs is interrupted by a sharp exclamation. A young cashier is confronted with the rudeness of a customer who belittles her because of her appearance. But the way she responds makes everyone freeze. Her words are not just shocking, but turn everything upside down. What happened next? This story of courage and justice will keep you on your toes until the very end. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead as the Friday evening crowd shuffled through the aisles of a bustling supermarket in suburban Chicago. It was the kind of place where the air smelled faintly of fresh bread and cleaning supplies, where carts squeaked against the polished floor, and where strangers exchanged polite nods without a second thought. The weekend rush had begun, tired workers grabbing last-minute groceries, parents corralling restless kids, and retirees carefully inspecting labels. Amid the hum of everyday life stood Emily, a 25-year-old cashier with a quiet demeanor and a sharp gaze that hinted at something deeper. Her dark hair was pulled into a messy bun, and her green apron hung loosely over a faded college hoodie. She scanned items with practiced ease, offering small smiles to customers as they passed through her line. The rhythm of the store was predictable, almost comforting, until it wasn't. At 6:47 p.m., a man stepped up to Emily's register, his presence cutting through the mundane like a jagged blade. Tom, a broad-shouldered guy in his late 40s, wore a tailored suit that screamed money and a scowl that screamed impatience. His graying hair was slicked back, and his watch glinted under the lights as he tossed a carton of milk, a loaf of bread, and a pack of steaks onto the conveyor belt. Emily greeted him with her usual "Evening, sir," but he didn't respond. Instead, he tapped his foot, muttering under his breath as she scanned the milk. Beep. The scanner lagged for a split second, nothing unusual, but it was enough. Jesus, can you move any slower? Tom snapped, his voice loud enough to turn heads at the next register. Emily's fingers paused over the bread, her eyes flicking up to meet his. She kept her tone even. Sorry, sir, just a glitch. It'll be quick. But Tom wasn't in the mood for apologies. He leaned forward, his face reddening. A glitch? Maybe it's not the machine. Maybe it's you. Where do you even come from, huh? You don't look like you belong here. Why don't you go back where you came from? The words landed like a punch, sharp and deliberate. The air in the checkout lane thickened, heavy with the weight of his insult. A woman in yoga pants behind him froze, her hand hovering over a bag of apples. An older guy pushing a cart full of canned goods stopped mid-aisle, his head tilting toward the scene. Emily's jaw tightened, but she didn't flinch. She set the bread down slowly, her movements deliberate, as if buying time to process what she'd just heard. The store's hum faded into a tense hush, broken only by the distant clatter of a shopping cart somewhere far off. For a moment, it seemed like she might let it slide, another cashier swallowing a customer's venom to keep the peace. But Emily wasn't that person. She straightened, her hazel eyes locking onto Tom's with an intensity that made him blink. Excuse me, she said, her voice low but steady, cutting through the silence like a wire-pulled taut. You might want to think twice before you say something like that. Maybe you should know who I am before you open your mouth. Her words hung there, sharp and unexpected, a challenge wrapped in calm. Tom's smirk faltered, replaced by a flicker of confusion. He hadn't expected pushback, not from a cashier, not here. The woman with the apples gasped softly, clutching her bag tighter. The older man edged closer, his curiosity piqued. Emily didn't break eye contact, her expression unreadable but resolute. Whatever came next, it was clear she wasn't backing down, and the crowd knew it. Something big was brewing, and they were all witnesses now, whether they liked it or not. Tom recovered quickly, puffing out his chest. Oh, you're gonna school me, huh? I don't care who you are, sweetheart. This is my country, not yours. His voice rose, daring her to respond, daring the onlookers to pick a side. The tension crackled like static, every eye in the vicinity glued to the showdown. Emily tilted her head slightly, a faint smile tugging at the corner of her lips, not mocking, but knowing. Your country, she repeated, her tone almost too calm. Funny you say that. Let's see if you still think so in a minute. The promise in her words sent a ripple through the crowd. What did she mean? What did she know? Tom's face twitched, a mix of arrogance and unease, as if he sensed the ground shifting beneath him. Emily reached for the next item, the pack of steaks, scanning it with a deliberate beep that echoed in the stillness. She wasn't just a cashier anymore. She was a spark, and the supermarket was about to catch fire. The supermarket's fluorescent glow seemed to dim as Emily's words lingered in the air. Let's see if you still think so in a minute. Tom's sneer froze, caught somewhere between bravado and doubt, his meaty hands clenching into fists on the counter. The crowd around them, shoppers clutching grocery bags, a teenage stock boy with a mop, stood transfixed, the ordinary chaos of Friday night replaced by a charged stillness. Emily slid the pack of steaks across the scanner, the beep slicing through the silence like a guillotine. She didn't rush, didn't falter. Her calm was a weapon, and Tom didn't know how to parry it. "You think you're clever? Huh?" He spat, leaning closer, his breath sour with entitlement. "Some minimum wage kid telling me how it is? I've lived here my whole life, born and raised. You? You don't even sound like you're from around here. Go back to wherever your people crawled out of." His voice boomed, a deliberate performance for the audience now circling tighter. The woman with the apples flinched, whispering to her husband, who shook his head in disapproval, but neither moved. A young guy in a bull's cap pulled out his phone, filming discreetly, the red dot blinking like an eye. Emily set the steaks aside, her hands steady, and looked up at Tom. Her hazel eyes glinted with something fierce, something he hadn't anticipated. "My people," she said, her tone soft, but edged with steel. "You don't know the first thing about me or where I'm from. But let me help you out." She took a slow breath, grounding herself as the crowd leaned in, hungry for what came next. "I was born 10 miles from here, in a hospital your taxes probably helped pay for. My mom? She came from Honduras, worked nights cleaning offices so I could eat. My dad? He's from Ohio, fixed cars for folks like you until his hands gave out. This is my country, same as yours." Her words landed like stones, each one heavier than the last. Tom's face twitched, a crack forming in his armor, but he doubled down. "Big deal," he scoffed, waving a hand. "Doesn't change facts. You're still slowing me down, and I don't have time for sob stories from." He stopped mid-sentence as a voice cut through from the back of the crowd. "She's got more right to be here than you ever will." Heads turned. An older man, maybe 70, stepped forward, his faded army jacket patched at the elbows. His face was weathered, his eyes sharp, and a silver pin on his chest gleamed Vietnam vet. He moved with a limp but carried himself like he'd faced worse than Tom and won. "I fought for this place," he said, his voice gravelly but firm. "For her. For her parents. For everybody who pulls their weight. You don't get to decide who belongs." The air shifted. The woman with the apples nodded faintly, her husband murmuring agreement. The guy with the phone zoomed in, capturing the veteran's stand. Tom's jaw tightened, his bravado wilting under the weight of the old man's gaze. "Oh, here we go," he muttered, rolling his eyes. "Another bleeding heart. Stay out of this, Grandpa." But the veteran didn't budge, and neither did Emily. She tilted her head, studying Tom like a puzzle she'd already solved. "Here's the thing," she said, her voice rising just enough to pull every ear closer. "I don't think you're in a position to throw stones. Not when I know who you are." A ripple of confusion passed through the crowd. Tom's smirk vanished, replaced by a flicker of unease. "What's that supposed to mean?" he demanded, his tone sharp but shaky. Emily reached into her apron pocket, pulling out her phone. She tapped the screen, her movements deliberate, and held it up for him to see. A news article, the headline bold. "Local businessman fined $50,000 for tax evasion." "You're Tom Delaney, right?" she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Owner of Delaney Auto Parts? Funny how you're so proud of your country when you've been cheating it for years." The crowd gasped, a collective intake of breath that sucked the oxygen from the room. Tom's face drained of color, his hands trembling as he snatched at the phone, but Emily pulled it back, unshaken. "Caught that story in my law class last semester," she added, her faint smile returning. "I'm studying to be a lawyer, by the way. Guess I've got a knack for digging up dirt." The checkout lane erupted in whispers. The veteran chuckled, a dry, approving sound. The woman with the apples stared at Tom like he'd sprouted horns. The guy filming muttered, "Holy crap," under his breath, his thumb hovering over the share button. Tom stumbled back a step, his bravado shattered, but his eyes burned with something darker, anger, cornered and dangerous. "You little," he started, his voice a growl, but Emily cut him off. "Careful," she warned, her calm unshaken. "You're on camera now. And I've got more where that came from." The threat hung there, quiet but lethal, and the crowd held its breath, waiting for Tom's next move. The spark had ignited, and the fire was spreading fast. The supermarket checkout lane felt like a courtroom now, the hum of refrigerators and distant chatter fading into a taut silence. Emily stood behind her register, phone still in hand, the damning article about Tom Delaney glowing on the screen. Her revelation, local businessman fined $50,000 for tax evasion, had ripped through the crowd like a thunderclap, leaving whispers and wide eyes in its wake. Tom's face was a mask of fury, flushed red and twitching, his polished exterior cracking under the weight of exposure. The veteran in the army jacket stood firm a few feet away, his steely gaze pinning Tom like a bug on a board. The guy with the phone kept filming, the red dot a silent witness, while the woman with the apples clutched her bag tighter, her husband murmuring, "Serves him right." Tom's hands balled into fists, veins bulging at his temples. "You think you're smart, huh?" he snarled, his voice trembling with rage. "Some college kid with a phone and a big mouth? You don't know who you're messing with." He lunged forward, slamming his palm on the counter so hard the pack of steaks jumped. The crowd flinched, a collective gasp rippling through them, but Emily didn't move. Her hazel eyes met his, steady and unflinching, a quiet strength radiating from her that made Tom's bluster look small. "I know enough," she said, her tone cool as ice. "And so does everyone here now. You're not the only one who can make noise." The veteran stepped closer, his limp barely slowing him. "Back off, son," he warned, his voice low but carrying the weight of decades. "You're digging yourself deeper." Tom shot him a venomous glare. "Stay out of this, old man. This isn't your fight." But the veteran didn't budge, his presence a wall Tom couldn't push through. The air crackled with tension, every shopper a juror in this impromptu trial, their stares boring into Tom as he floundered. He turned back to Emily, desperation creeping into his anger. "What's your game, huh? You gonna blackmail me? Ruin my life over a lousy fine?" His voice rose to a shout, echoing off the ceiling. "You've got no idea what I've built. I employ people, good people. You're nothing but a cashier with a grudge." The insult landed flat, drowned by the growing murmur of the crowd. The woman with the apples shook her head, muttering, "What a jerk." The guy filming smirked, zooming in on Tom's unraveling composure. Emily set her phone down, crossing her arms. "No grudge," she said, her voice cutting through his tirade. "Just facts. You broke the law, got caught, and paid a price. Sound familiar? Or do you only care about rules when they don't apply to you?" The question hung there, sharp and deliberate, and for a moment, Tom faltered, his mouth opening, then closing, like a fish gasping for air. The crowd leaned in, sensing blood in the water. But then his eyes narrowed, a new fire sparking behind them. "You want facts?" he hissed, leaning so close his breath fogged the plastic divider between them. "Here's one. I've got friends, big friends. Lawyers, cops, people who'll make sure you regret this little stunt. You think you're untouchable? Keep talking, sweetheart. I'll bury you." The threat landed heavy, a dark promise that sent a chill through the onlookers. The woman with the apples gasped, her husband pulling her back a step. The veteran's jaw tightened, his hand curling into a fist. But Emily didn't blink. She tilted her head, studying him like a specimen under glass. "Bury me?" she repeated, almost amused. "That's bold, Tom. Especially since I've got something else on you, something bigger than a fine." The words dropped like a bomb, and the crowd froze. Tom's bravado flickered, his eyes darting as if searching for an escape. "What are you talking about?" he demanded, but his voice cracked, betraying him. Emily reached under the counter, pulling out a thin folder, a move so unexpected it silenced even the whispers. She flipped it open, revealing a stack of printed emails, highlighted in yellow. "Recognize these?" she asked, holding up the top page. Tom's eyes widened, recognition flashing across his face before he could hide it. Where'd you get that?" he stammered, his swagger crumbling. Emily's faint smile returned, cold and triumphant. "Law school project," she said simply. "I've been tracking your business for months. They're from your supplier. Proof you've been dodging taxes and cutting corners on safety regs. OSHA's gonna love this." The crowd erupted, gasps, murmurs, a low whistle from the guy with the phone. The veteran grinned, a rare crack in his stern facade. Tom staggered back, his face ashen, hands shaking as he pointed at her. "You're lying. That's fake. You can't prove anything." But his voice was weak, drowned by the rising tide of disbelief around him. Emily tapped the folder. "Wanna bet? It's all here. And it's all legal. You're done, Tom." The breaking point had arrived, and Tom was teetering on the edge. The crowd held its breath, waiting for his next move. Would he crack, or would he fight? One thing was clear. Emily had turned the tables, and the fire she'd sparked was now ablaze. The supermarket checkout lane had become a battlefield, and Emily held the high ground. The folder of damning emails lay open on the counter, its yellow highlighted pages glaring under the harsh lights like a spotlight on Tom Delaney's unraveling life. His supplier's words, proof of tax dodging and safety violations, burned into the silence, each line a nail in the coffin of his arrogance. The crowd stood riveted, a mix of shock and a rippling through them. The veteran in the army jacket nodded approvingly, his arms crossed. The guy filming with his phone edged closer, muttering, "This is gold." The woman with the apples clutched her husband's arm, whispering, "She's incredible." Tom's face was a storm of panic and fury, his eyes darting from the folder to Emily, then to the growing circle of onlookers. His suit, once a symbol of power, now hung on him like a costume too big to fill. You can't do this," he stammered, his voice hoarse and cracking. "Those are private. You've got no right." He lunged for the folder, his hand trembling, but Emily slid it back with a flick of her wrist, her calm unshaken. "Public records," she said, her tone steady as granite. "Freedom of Information Act. I've got every right, and you've got no defense." The words hit him like a slap, and he staggered back, his bravado crumbling into dust. The crowd buzzed, a low hum of excitement and disbelief. The veteran stepped forward, his voice cutting through the noise. "Sounds like you've been burying yourself for years, son." She just dug it up. His dry chuckle punctuated the moment, and a few shoppers nodded, their murmurs turning to agreement. Tom's head snapped toward him, desperation flaring. "You think this is funny? I'll sue her. I'll sue all of you. I've got money, connections." "Enough," Emily interrupted, her voice rising for the first time, firm and commanding. She tapped her phone, still resting on the counter. "You've been loud enough, Tom. And lucky for me, I've got it all recorded, every word since you opened your mouth. The threats, the insults, the whole show. So here's your choice. Apologize, right now, to me and everyone here, or this goes viral by morning. Your connections can figure out how to spin that." The ultimatum hung heavy, a guillotine blade poised to drop. Tom's eyes widened, his breath ragged as he scanned the crowd, dozens of faces, some pitying, some scornful, all waiting. The guy with the phone grinned, waving it slightly. "Already got 1,000,000 views in my head, man." The woman with the apples spoke up, her voice trembling but clear. "You should be ashamed. She's just doing her job." Her husband added, "Apologize, or leave. We've heard enough." Tom's shoulders slumped, the fight draining out of him like air from a punctured tire. He opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again, his voice barely a whisper. "Fine," he muttered, staring at the floor. "I'm sorry." The words were grudging, hollow, but they landed all the same. A ripple of relief passed through the crowd, followed by a smattering of claps. The veteran smirked. "Took you long enough." Emily exhaled, her posture softening but her gaze still sharp. She slid the folder back under the counter, pocketing her phone. "Good choice," she said, then nodded to the groceries. "That'll be $42.50. Cash or card?" The normalcy of the question cut through the tension like a knife, and a few shoppers laughed, the sound nervous but genuine. Tom fumbled for his wallet, hands shaking as he swiped his card, avoiding her eyes. The beep of the transaction felt final, a quiet end to his public execution. But the story wasn't over. As Tom grabbed his bags and turned to slink away, the veteran caught Emily's eye and stepped closer. "You handled that like a pro, kid," he said, his tone warm but serious. "But watch your back. Guys like him don't forget." Emily nodded, a flicker of unease crossing her face for the first time. "I know," she said softly. "I'm ready." The crowd began to disperse, some lingering to offer Emily quiet thanks, a handshake from the husband, a shy smile from the woman with the apples. The guy with the phone approached, holding it out. "Posted it," he said, grinning. "Tagged you as cashier queen. Hope that's cool." Emily laughed, a small, tired sound. "Guess I'm famous now." As she rang up the next customer, the adrenaline faded, leaving a quiet pride in its wake. Tom shuffled toward the exit, head down, the weight of his defeat pulling at his steps. But outside, in the dim parking lot, he paused by his car, his silhouette tense. He pulled out his phone, dialed a number, and muttered, "Yeah, it's me. We've got a problem." His voice was low, venomous, a promise of retaliation simmering beneath the surface. Inside, Emily scanned a loaf of bread, unaware, but the fire she lit was far from out. The supermarket's fluorescent lights flickered as the last of the Friday evening crowd trickled out, leaving behind a quiet hum and the faint scent of spilled coffee. Emily stood at her register, wiping down the counter with a rag, her green apron stained from a long shift. The chaos of the showdown with Tom Delaney felt like a distant memory, though only an hour had passed. Her hands moved mechanically, but her mind replayed the moment, his grudging apology, the crowd's applause, the veteran's warning. She glanced at the clock, 8:03 p.m. Almost time to clock out. Outside, the Chicago suburbs settled into dusk, streetlights casting long shadows across the parking lot. Word of the incident spread fast. By Monday, the guy with the phone, whose name, she learned, was Jake, had uploaded the video to YouTube. Titled Cashier Queen Shuts Down Jerk, it racked up 200,000 views in 48 hours. Comments poured in. She's a legend. That guy got wrecked. Justice served. Emily hadn't asked for the fame, but she couldn't deny the warmth it sparked, a quiet validation after years of scraping by, balancing law school and this job. Her phone buzzed with texts from classmates. You're viral. Is that really you? She smiled faintly, pocketing it as her manager, a wiry woman named Carla, approached. You okay after Friday? Carla asked, her tone gruff but kind. Emily nodded. Yeah, just glad it's over. Carla smirked. Over? Honey, you're the talk of the town. Local paper called, wants an interview. Said they're running a piece tomorrow. Emily blinked, caught off guard. An interview? For what? Carla shrugged. For being a badass, I guess. Oh, and some law firm emailed, offered you an internship. Said they saw the video, liked your guts. The news hit like a wave, washing away the fatigue. An internship? Her dream of escaping the checkout lane, of fighting for justice with more than words, suddenly felt real. She thanked Carla, her voice steady despite the flutter in her chest, and clocked out, stepping into the cool evening air. The parking lot was nearly empty, save for a familiar figure leaning against a beat-up truck. The veteran, his army jacket unmistakable. He waved her over, his expression softer than before. Thought I'd check on you, he said, his gravelly voice warm. Name's Ray, by the way. Emily smiled. Emily. And thanks for stepping in back there. Ray shrugged. Didn't do much. You had him on the ropes before I opened my mouth. That folder trick? Pure gold. She laughed, a rare sound after days of tension. Months of research paid off. Wasn't planning to use it like that, though. Ray's eyes twinkled. Sometimes the fight finds you. You did good, kid. Made us all think. Their chat was cut short by a notification on her phone, a news alert. She tapped it, and her breath caught. The headline read, Delaney Auto Parts faces boycott after viral video. The article detailed Tom's outburst, the video spread, and a growing backlash, customers canceling orders, suppliers pulling contracts. A grainy photo showed Tom leaving his office, head down, dodging reporters. Emily scrolled further. OSHA had launched an investigation based on new evidence, citing safety violations. Her folder, it seemed, had reached the right hands. Ray peered over her shoulder, chuckling. Well, damn. You didn't just win. You crushed him. Emily shook her head, a mix of pride and unease settling in. I didn't want to ruin him. Just wanted him to stop. Ray nodded, his gaze distant. Sometimes people need a hard lesson to learn. He'll survive if he's smart. Across town, Tom sat in his darkened living room, the glow of his laptop casting shadows on his haggard face. The boycott had gutted his business, sales down 40% in days. His phone buzzed with angry voicemails from clients, lawyers, even his own sister. What were you thinking? He replayed the video, wincing at his own voice, his threats, his defeat. For the first time, he saw himself through others' eyes, small, petty, exposed. He shut the laptop, staring at the wall. A flicker of regret stirred, too late to undo the damage, but enough to make him question. Back at the parking lot, Emily climbed into her old Honda, Ray's words echoing. You made us all think. She drove home, the city lights blurring past, and felt a shift inside her. The fight hadn't just been about Tom, it was about proving something bigger to herself and the world. At her apartment, she found a note slipped under the door, an anonymous thank you from a coworker. You gave us a voice. She smiled, tucking it away. Days later, the paper ran its story. Cashiers stand sparks community change. The internship came through, a stepping stone to her law career. Tom's business limped on, humbled by the fallout, his bluster silenced. Emily didn't gloat. She moved forward, her quiet courage leaving a mark that lingered, a reminder that justice, wielded with truth, could shift the world, one small victory at a time.